Bloodborne, Chapter 2, The Healing Church, Lady Maria, Iosefka, and Ebrietas.
If it's cold blood you're interested in, you should try the Healing Church. The church controls all knowledge on blood administration, all varieties of blood. Across the valley of the east of Yharnam lies the town of the Healing Church, known as the Cathedral Ward, and deep within the Cathedral Ward is the old Grand Cathedral, the birthplace of the Healing Church's special blood, or so they say. Yharnamites don't share much with outsiders. Normally they would let you not near this place, but the hunt is on tonight. This might be your chance.
As a first concrete objective the hunter can make for themselves to get to the Healing Church, look for answers. The Healing Church is an institution that, while it doesn't technically rule over Yharnam, serves as the city's anchor and structure. It is from the Healing Church that the art of blood ministration, the art that Yharnam would become famous for, was first brought. With the use of the Healing Church's special blood, they were able to cure any disease, forming a religion devoted to the worship of gods and blood. When tales of the curative properties of Yharnam blood spread, those suffering from curative properties and incurable diseases often travelled to Yharnam in order to seek out their last chance at salvation. The hunter was one such individual. According to the information leading up, we can believe that in search of blood that can cure any disease, the travels to Yharnam is the answer. So the hunter travelled to Yharnam to be cured. But what is the Healing Church? Where does it come from? And most importantly, what is the secret behind their special blood? The first sane member of the Healing Church the hunter encounters is Alfred the Executioner. From Alfred, the hunter learns more about the roots of the Healing Church.
The Healing Church is the foundation of blood healing. Well, I'm a simple hunter, quite unfamiliar with the ins outs in the institution, but I have heard the holy medium of blood healing is venerated in the main cathedral, and that councillors of the old church reside in the high stratum of Cathedral Ward. The tomb of the gods carved out below Yharnam should be familiar to every hunter. Well, once a group of young Bergenwerth scholars discovered a holy medium deep within the tomb. This led to the founding of the Healing Church and the establishment of blood healing.
The short story is that a group of scholars in Bergenwerth discovered blood, incredible power in the tombs underneath. Specifically, discovered the old blood. The old blood and knowledge of the great ones that existed led to revolution in the college as theories and experiments. Master Willem, head of Bergenwerth College, disagreed with the idea of using the old blood of the great ones to advance humanity.
Fear the old blood.
This led to the Bergenwerth schism, in which a group of scholars led by Lawrence left Bergenwerth and founded the Healing Church. There are 4 individuals who we now know are the founders of the church. There may well be unnamed others, but Lawrence, German, Mikolash, and Maria. Lawrence became the first vicar, founding a new religion and promising a cure to any disease through the use of his miraculous blood ministration. A note found in the Cathedral Ward reads, "Heir to the ritual of blood, purveyor of ministration, place your hands on the altered sacred covering and inscribe Master Lawrence's adage upon your flesh." Lawrence and his blood ministration brought a new era into Yharnam, a culture of blood worships spreading through the population. But with the tainted blood of the great ones following through human veins, the scourge of the beast came to Yharnam. Those who had been ministered by the old blood were susceptible to coming under the effects of the scourge. In response to this, German, one of the men who had sided with Lawrence in the Bergenwerth schism, founded the workshop. Located in a hidden area of the upper Cathedral Ward, the workshop was a place of training of elite warriors, dispatched by the church to hunt the beasts and prevent panic from spreading through the population. The hunter attire reminds us, once the static articles of a hunter fashioned at the workshop, a fine piece of hunter attire that provides stable defense to anyone facing Yharnam's beastly threat, allows one to stalk beasts unannounced by cover of night. The last sentence is the most important. Allows one to stalk beasts unannounced by cover of night. Originally, the workshop was likely a secret institution. The hunters wore no symbols, had no uniform, save for the Saw Hunter badge, which kept in order to identify one another. Badges crafted long ago at the workshop attested to one's prowess as a hunter of beasts. The workshop is gone, and no group recognizes this meaningless badge. They operated in the cover of darkness, disposing of Yharnamites who had succumbed to the scourge of the beast, likely more of a cover-up than anything else, anything to prevent the public becoming aware that the blood they were being administered, used to heal, was turning them into monsters. But what of Maria? According to Maria's hunting attire, among the first hunters, all students of Gurman, was Lady Maria, Hunter Maria. Maria is distantly related to the undead queen, but had great admiration for Gurman, unaware of his curious mania. Born in Canehurst, Maria was a beautiful woman, no doubt even by Canehurst standards, while she was a relative of the queen. To the doubt and aristocratic nobles of Canehurst this likely meant very little. No doubt every noble was dying to tell everyone they knew about how they were Annalise's 12th cousins, 7th removed, and so forth, and so the relation probably didn't mean much. Unlike the rest of her people, however, Maria disliked the use of blood weaponry, as stated by the Rachio. This sword feeds not of blood, but instead demands great dexterity. Lady Maria was fond of this aspect of Rachio, as she frowned upon blood blades, despite being a distant relative of the queen. However, after the events that took place at the fishing hamlet, Maria could no longer bear to wield a weapon. As she and Gurman retrieved the orphan for Bergenwerth, Maria threw Rachio into the well. One day she abandoned her beloved Rachio, casting it into dark well, when she could stomach it no longer. We, as Hunter, first hear of Lady Maria from the patients in the Nightmare Research Hall. They call out to her and speak with genuine admiration and even love. They ask her to hold their hand or to help them to cure for them. The key to the balcony on the first floor of the research hall. Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower gave this to her patient, Adeline. Maria had hoped Adeline would find comfort in faint breeze that carried the scent of flowers from outside, but Adeline couldn't fathom her intentions. It seems that Maria genuinely cared for the patients of the church's experiments, as she went out her way to try and make Adeline more comfortable in her suffering. While the experiments themselves were gruesome, there's no evidence that there were any malicious intent towards the patients themselves, though it may be their madness. The patients all seemed to be there willingly, even apologizing for having been failures in their experimentation. But eventually, Maria died. Her passing marks the end of an era, the beginning of the transition from the old church and the old hunters into the new ones, the ones that we find ourselves engaging in the present. But how did Maria die? When we met her, she is noticeably dead, at least a dead consciousness, in a dream. A spirit that can be. The evidence seems to point towards a slit throat, as the blood on her blouse has travelled down from her neck. In addition, during a fight, the hunter visibly stabs her in the throat in order to initiate the second phase of the battle. This seems to point towards Maria's death as an act of suicide, slitting her own throat possibly, not being able to move on with the past mistakes that she's made. But let us pause for a moment to remember the individual other than Gurman and Maria who left with Lawrence, Mikolash. There's very little information on Mikolash and on the school of Mensis, which was no doubt founded to continue the work of Bergenwerth. Mikolash founded his institution in a city hidden by the church, Yargul. From here, Mikolash could research in secret while supposedly reporting to Lawrence. the upper cathedral ward key tells us. The upper echelons of the healing church are formed by the school of Mensis, based in the unseen village, and in the choir occupying the upper cathedral ward. The school of Mensis was likely there first, as its research more closely resembles Bergenwerth, and its practice of researching and secretly matches the healing church's early strategy of working, for the most part, behind the scenes. Everything changed with Old Yharnam. Ashen blood was a horrible epidemic that spread like wildfire. Naturally, in order to cure the disease, blood ministration was used in excess on each and every one of the victims. This would lead to the scourge, as referenced by the antidotes. Small medicinal tablets that counteract poison, used to treat ashen blood, the baffling sickness that ravaged Old Yharnam long ago. These tablets only provide short-term relief. The ashen blood alignment eventually triggered the spread of the beastly scourge. After Old Yharnam, the scourge could no longer be kept a secret. The workshop was abandoned and replaced with a new group that would become the Healing Church Hunters, led by the hunter Ludwig. The workshop was no longer necessary and was sealed away. It was likely at this time that the Healing Church took more control of Yharnam, the church effectively acting as the governing body of the city. With the church firmly seated in power as the saviors who brought the blood ministration to Yharnam, the choir was formed in the upper reaches of the city. By now, the Healing Church was being run, not by Lawrence and German, but the generation who came after them. The choir ruled over the church, while Ludwig's hunters formed the new ranks of the church's police force. The school of Mensis remained, but likely grew further and further apart from the church over time, likely dissatisfied with the progress of research that had been made since the church. Split from Bergenwerth, the choir began to research the old blood anew, and more of the great ones. The choir garb tells us, members of the choir are both the highest-ranking clerics of the Healing Church and scholars who continue the work that began at Bergenwerth. It is uncertain exactly how much of the church's religion was merely used as a figurehead. It's not clear if the choir truly believed that the great ones were gods, or they simply used that as a way to legitimize their research. They certainly acknowledged that the great ones, if not gods, were certainly godlike. The level of detail devoted to the sacred symbols and carvings in the church can only display veneration of the great ones, a vision of a superior beings, specifically the formless great one Odin. To create a closer look at the choir's motivations and research, let's take a moment to analyze Iosefka. Dr. Iosefka, a character whom the hunter encounters quite early in their adventure. We begin with the hunter awakening in the first floor of Dr. Iosefka's clinic after receiving their very first blood ministration. Iosefka is the very first of the hunter's encounters, and after the hunter dies to the wolf beast and is sent to the hunter's dream, returning with weaponry marking them a hunter, if the hunter travels back up the stairs towards the clinic, they will encounter a door locked and barred. Through a crack in the door we see a woman dressed in white, whom we can speak. "Are you out on the hunt? And I'm sorry, but I cannot open this door. I'm Iosefka. The patients here in my clinic must not be exposed to infection. I know that you hunt for us, for our town, but I'm sorry. Please, this is all I can do." Iosefka will assist the hunter by providing them with a specially concentrated blood capable of fully healing the hunter. The product of a slow and careful refinement process, this rare blood vial appears to be a clinic original. The hunter can return to Iosefka at any time to collect more blood, but can only carry a single vial at a time. This changes, however, after the death of Father Gascon. This time, when the hunter comes to Iosefka, it will be no blood. Instead, the doctor will ask the hunter to direct any individuals they come across to her clinic, so they can be treated and cured. From this point onwards, the doctor speaks with a slightly deeper tone of voice. However, from this point onwards, while Iosefka may look the same through the window, it is not Iosefka. From this point onwards, Iosefka will ask the hunter to bring her more and more people, assuring that they are being taken proper care of. As a reward for the hunter, if the hunter begins to bring her people, she will eventually start providing the hunter with blue elixirs. Blue elixir is described as dubious liquid, medicine used in strange experiments conducted by high ministers of healing church. A rather chilling item indeed for a common blood ministration doctor to be carrying. But it isn't, unless the hunter finds the back entrance to the clinic by climbing up an adjacent building connecting to the Forbidden Woods, where the truth of Iosefka's research can be discovered. Here, the results of research that the hunter sent to pass into Iosefka's clinic will be found transformed and twisted into celestials, blue-skinned kin of the cosmos. If the hunter sent anyone there to help, they will surely be perished. They will only find a single celestial located in the sick room. Upon its death, it drops Iosefka's blood vial, possibly one that was being saved for the hunter upon his return. There are presumably the remains of the true Iosefka, whom the hunter meets at the beginning. As the hunter travels upstairs towards the top of the clinic, one of two events take place. The hunter goes to the top of the clinic before the blood moon has risen. The impostor will attack. She wields a threaded cane and a repeating pistol, and if her health is low, she will even attack the hunter with a call of beyond, the ultimate weapon of the healing church. One of the secret rites of the choir, long ago, the healing church used phantasms to reach a loyalty plane of darkness, but failed to make contact with the outer reaches of the cosmos. The rite failed to achieve its intended purpose, but instead created a small exploding star, now a powerful part of choir's arsenal. At times, failure is the mother of invention. The false Iosefka is one of the four who wield the Call of Beyond, the other three being Mikolash, the Forgotten Madman, and Yuri, the choir member found in the Bergenwerth mansion. We can infer from this revelation that the false Iosefka is a member of the choir, relocating from the upper cathedral ward to Iosefka's clinic in order to continue her research, possibly because of the fact that due to the spread of the scourge of the beast, the cathedral ward is no longer a safe place. Upon killing Iosefka, she will drop a powerful Odeon Wraith rune. Interesting enough, this can locate a weaker version of the Odeon Wraith by killing Adala the nun, or by looting it off the celestial she becomes if the hunter sent her to Iosefka's clinic. This connection only reinforces the false Iosefka's affiliation with the church, and that she had a rank higher importance than a nun. This is only one of two possible events that can occur. If the hunter goes to the clinic after the blood moon has risen, they will find her on all fours, perched on one of the operating tables. God, I'm nauseous. Have you ever felt this? It's progressing. I can see things. I knew it. I'm different. I'm no beast. Oh, God, it feels awful, but it proves that I'm chosen. Can't you see how the wraith inside my head, it's rather rapturous. With enough time to conclude her research, Iosefka has begun her ascension. Killing her can drop what I believe is the orphan's umbilical cord, which was recovered by the choir. But what was this research? What did the choir do? How did they do it exactly? This brings us to the final topic of our current situation. Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos. Ebrietas is found in the depths of the orphanage, described as key to the orphanage, birthplace of choir. The orphanage, shadowed by the grand cathedral, was a place of scholarship and experimentation, where the young orphans became potent, unseen thinkers for the healing church. The choir would later split. The healing church was a creation of the orphanage. We have established previously that it was originally the school of Mensis which performed research for the church in the secrecy of Yargul. However, with the growth of the church's power after the cleansing of Old Yarnum, there was no longer a need of secrecy, and a new effort was put forward into spreading the old blood. It would be the choir who would fulfill this need, with the orphanage as a laboratory. The orphanage is located directly behind the Grand Cathedral, and we can recall that it was Gilbert mentioning that deep within the cathedral ward is the old Grand Cathedral, the birthplace of the healing church's blood. But the cathedral is not the source of the blood. While it is provided to the public from the cathedral, it actually originates in the orphanage, from Ebrietas and the Celestials. Ebrietas is the left-behind Great One, whatever that may mean, and commune and worked with the healing church in their research. We find multiple references to this. One of the secret rites of the choir, ranking members of the healing church, use phantasms, invertebrates known to be augurs of the Great Ones, to partially summon abandoned Ebrietas, one of few rites allowed to directly utilize the power of the Great Ones, and evidence that the choir had approached the eldritch truth, the augur of Ebrietas. Great chalices unlock deeper reaches of the Bergenwerth labyrinth. The great chalice became cornerstone of the choir. The elite delegation of the healing church was also the first great chalice brought back to the surface since the time of Bergenwerth, and allowed the choir to have audience with Ebrietas. But who is Ebrietas? What is her purpose? What research did she allow the healing church to perform, and what relation does she have to the Great Ones and the Old Blood? The healing church operated in secrecy in its formative days. Mikolash slowly continued research on his own and the Old Blood through kidnappings and experimentations. Lawrence administered the Old Blood to the ill, and those who succumbed to the scourge of the beast were eliminated under cover of darkness by German's hunters. While this was going on, the church quietly continued their research into the Great Ones, independent from Bergenwerth. Initially, the only Great One that Healing Church had identified had been Kos, the Great One from the depths of the ocean. The Church's experiment into the Great Ones, therefore, revolved around water, as described by the brain fluid. In the early days of the Healing Church, the Great Ones were linked to the ocean, and so the cerebral path and patients would ennoble water and listen to the howl of the sea. Brain fluid writhed inside the head, initial markings of internal eyes. It was a fruitless pursuit, however, for as far as we know, the Great Ones do not originate from the sea, but from the dreamlands and the cosmos. As much, the experiments were failures. Overseeing the research from the astral clock tower was Lady Maria. After the Hamlet massacre, Maria refused to hunt again. Instead, she began to run research towards the Great Ones of the budding healing church, but her thoughts could never leave the blasphemous nature of what she and German had done at the Hamlet, how the orphan had been ripped from its mother's womb, nor would she allow to be forgotten. Atonement for the riches, but the wrath of Mother Kos. Not all of the Hamlet had been destroyed. The parasites that inhabited their mother Kos and managed to infest the villagers, transforming them into ascended kin of the cosmos. German was the first hunter, and Maria his greatest pupil. In this sense, they can be seen as the father and mother of all hunters. Anyone who calls themselves a hunter, no matter what organization they associate themselves with, is the descendant in some way from German and Maria, who murdered the orphan of Kos. Curse the fiends, their children too, and the children forever true. Perhaps Maria was haunted by unending nightmares of what she had done. Perhaps in her frustration she desperately continued her experiments. Surely something had come out of atrocities she had committed. But each and every one of her experiments was another failure, another dead end. The patients began to notice her frustration with them, sobbing, apologizing for their failures, begging her for forgiveness. Maybe over time she became less and less compassionate with the patients, and more racked with guilt. On the other hand, her desire to uncover the truth behind Kos and the Great Ones could not be stopped. However, She had, on one point, cared for the patients of the research hall and didn't want to see them suffer. She could see only one way out. "Oh, I know very well that the secrets beckon so sweetly. Only honest death will cure you now, liberate you from your wild curiosity." Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower also tells us this. She ended her own life. Her death marked the end of an era. By this point, Mikolash and the school of Mensis had already begun to draw further and further away from the rest of the healing church. With her death, Gerben spiraled into depression, and the elite workshop was sealed away and abandoned. The old secretive, quiet healing church had begun to die, and may have fallen apart completely were it not for the events of Old Yharnam. The church had always relied on gaining new followers through use of their miraculous disease-curing blood, and Old Yharnam gave them the perfect opportunity to display their religion to the masses. After Old Yharnam's cleansing, the healing church exploded in power and fame. They could no longer operate in secrecy, and needed a much more significant source of the blood. And so, the choir was born. An elite delegation of old scholars and clerics, the choir would become the new ipso facto leaders of the healing church. The choir plunged into the tomb, deeper than anyone had ever gone since the days of Bergenwerth, looking for a greater source of blood and a way in which to bring the research to the next level. They travelled to the numerous ruins of the Bethumim city of Iz, which had not been entered since the time of Bergenwerth scholars. They went to meet with Ebrietas, the daughter of the cosmos. The great Iz chalice was relocated to the orphanage located behind the grand cathedral and would serve as the main laboratory for the choir. Interestingly, we see many carriages throughout our time in Yharnam. Many hunters will recall seeing or leaving notes in front of them and charming or amusing words like, "Where are all the babies?" We encounter no child-sized coffins in the streets of Yharnam, but many carriages. Where do we find child-sized coffins? In the upper cathedral ward, in the orphanage. The choir communed with the Ebrietas and used the new knowledge to experiment on the babies that were either abandoned or sent to the orphanage. It is even possible that after the widespread epidemic of the scourge, the choir went through the public and gathered all babies and children of Yharnam, and under the pretense of protecting them until the hunt was over. Yharnamites would have no reason not to trust the church, and were likely delighted that their governing body had such a concern for the welfare of their children. In the Lumen Flower Gardens, however, we can see the result of their experiments. A look at the way the celestials seem to grow from the ground. Even the name, garden, seems to suggest an almost sickening way in which the celestials have harvested from the ground like a crop. This was the source of Yharnam's special blood. The children, who were elevated to becoming celestials, were then harvested and used as source of blood for the church, a renewable source that would allow them to provide the entire city with as much blood as it needed, with the sacrifice of the children. The false Iosefka was one such researcher who fled to the clinic after the upper cathedral ward was lost to the scourge. The presence of the scourge beast in the upper cathedral ward only proved that the scourge was too much even for the choir to handle, and that the researchers likely fled. One researcher fled to Bergenwerth. The first member of the choir that the hunter encounters, the choir member Uri, is seen wandering the second floor of Bergenwerth. She even wears a blindfold cap, reminding us that members of the choir are both the highest-ranking clerics of the healing church and scholars who continue the work that began at Bergenwerth. The eye covering indicates their debt to the teachings of Master Willem, even though their paths diverged. The choir had an enormous respect for Master Willem. Even though they split away from him, there was never any violence between the two factions in Bergenwerth, only a different philosophy that led to the inevitable separation. It is no wonder that the choir never disposed of Master Willem. They truly saw him as a highly respected figure in their history. In fact, Master Willem had achieved what the choir so desperately yearned for. He had ascended to the level of the gods. In beginning days, anyone could talk in regards to the law of Iosefka. Who is she? Is she an imposter? When do they switch? What is a real one? How? What happens? So much focus was placed on Iosefka that the real one got swept away. People were so engrossed with the revelation that Iosefka was replaced an imposter that stopped looking at the original. Who was Iosefka? Like the imposter, she wears the white church garb, which tells us that these doctors are superiors to black prevention hunters and specialists in experimentally black blood, administration of the scourge and the beast. They believed that the medicine was not means of treatment, but rather a method of research, and that some knowledge can only be obtained by exposing oneself to the sickness. This implies that Iosefka was a high-ranking member of the church, similarly to the impostor, and a specialist on experimental blood. Now look at the back of Iosefka's clinic. Bodies have been dumped into pits. Vials upon vials and vials of blood have been collected. Hundreds of research notes have been written. There are also celestials in the forests and the forbidden woods who appear to have wandered off from the clinic. How could this be the work of the false Iosefka, when the original doesn't get replaced until later? Furthermore, how was she replaced in the first place? There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that it is impossible to copy someone's face. There's only one type of woman that has the same face as another, a sister. In the back of Iosefka's clinic, we find a half-transformed celestial, dead on an operating table. Iosefka isn't some innocent doctor. She's the one who invented the process in the first place. This explains why Iosefka's blood vials can be found within the nightmare of Mensis. As the school of Mensis and the choir shared their research, it's impossible that the Iosefka's blood vial is, itself, the key to the celestial transformation. A clinic original. Who knows what might have happened when we consumed enough of it? Would the hunter be transformed themselves if they had enough of Iosefka's blood vials? We would never know. But when the false Iosefka fled to the clinic, she brought with her an artifact that the choir had previously covered from Bergenwerth, the orphan's cord of the eye. The false Iosefka sought to ascend just as Master Willem had, by lining her brain with eyes in the manner he had done so many years ago. She isn't pregnant at all, but instead has run out of time to continue experimentation. In a last-ditch effort, she imbibes Willem's cord, but it doesn't work, as evidenced by the fact that she bleeds dark red. The first note the hunter receives. Many hunters have noted that there are certain enemies which bleed not red, but clear and almost pale-coloured blood. However, this is not specifically pale blood. If this indeed was the blood of the Great Ones, there would be few figures whom would believe to bleed pale, but in fact bleed a dark red themselves. Amygdala, the orphan, the wet nurse, and the moon presence. There are, however, certain figures which bleed what we'll call serum. Celestials, brain-suckers, Master Willem, Rom, and Ebrietas. Rom, an ascended mortal, does bleed red if the hunter attacks a stomach, as do a spiderkin. But if the hunter attacks the eyes and heads of Rom, approach see they bleed the serum of the kin. Serum is not the blood of the Great Ones, but rather blood of the kin of the cosmos, those who were once mortal but ascended to becoming kin of the Great Ones. Notice how Ebrietas is mentioned as being the daughter of the cosmos? This doesn't follow, as every Great One loses its child. Instead, the Great Ones yearn for surrogates. Ebrietas was possibly Perthumrum, as she is found by the scholars in Perthumrum's city. It is well documented that Perthumrum's research and experimentations with the old blood led to their ascension as they yearned an eldritch truth. However, they were struck down before they could truly ascend to being Great Ones. The scourge of beasts spread throughout the people, the blood moon rose, the Great Ones descended, and a womb was left with child. Yarnum's pregnancy with Murgo was a failure, and so, in search of surrogate, Ebrietas possibly a researcher of Cthulhu ascended to the level of Great Ones. It is so very interesting how Ebrietas is repeatedly referred to as having been left behind. Ebrietas is not a true Great One. Instead, she was ascended becoming kin, just as Willem did. The Cthulhus are ancient. Who knows how long it took for her to develop into her current form? Perhaps in 1,000 years, Master Willem will look much like her. She was abandoned, as the Great Ones left after the devastation of Cthulhu, and she waited in the labyrinth, caring for the phantasms, small slug-like creatures, which are named as being familiar as the Great Ones, and when the scourge stumbled upon her in she would finally have an outlet with which to commune with the outside world. Willem and the scholars met with Ebrietas, and though through her they began their research of the old blood, the tainted blood of Ebrietas, surrogate child of the cosmos, it was through Ebrietas' tainted blood that the tragedy which struck Cthulhu would be doomed to repeat itself in the city of Yharnam. Ebrietas seems to get her name from the Ebrietas butterfly, a species of butterfly found in far distant lands, which matches the, although admittedly distorted form of Ebrietas as having an almost butterfly-like appearance. When we meet her, she is found in front of a corpse of a vacuous spider. Remember that even though something may die in the waking world, its conscience can continue to survive in the dreamlands. Ebrietas had lost her daughter Rom. It's tragically, really. Every Great One loses his child. But there were many surrogates who can be found in the baby carriages throughout Yharnam.